Hi, Stevie. How's it going? Thanks very much for joining us. I hope you're all keeping well. Precious fluids. So, thanks for joining us wherever you are, folks. Tonight's episode, just quite a brief one about the newspaper article that Frank Herbert researched that he never actually bothered to write in the end. But this is the beginning of all the body of research that he does on deserts, ecology, barrier grasses, etc. Excuse me. So it's quite an interesting thing. We have a bit of this kind of stuff around this part of the world, lots of barrier grasses around the coast. And my understanding is, I think it up in Florence, Oregon, with the level of sort of sand encroachment upon the area, I think they were looking at sort of strategies to prevent sand encroachment from Arabian countries. So, as I said, it's interesting that Frank, being a journalist, he never bothered to write this article. I'm not quite sure why, because it certainly was a good story. At least as far as I know, it's not published. The full article, or what Frank was going to write, by the way, I think is in a book called The Road to Dune. I think I might have referenced it in this episode, but I think you can get all of the sort of details of that there. Excuse me. So specifically, hi Grimdark, early this time, sorry, probably said that a second ago. Grimdark saying, I'm here early this time, no gym today to rest. I've got to stop mumbling when I read people's comments, Grimdark, so I'm going to try and get myself into the flow of it right away. And specifically the Oregon dunes for Frank's influence. Absolutely. And sound is good, Brad, you got in there. Thank you very much before I asked. So yeah, again, folks, if you do have any questions on the ecology of Frank Herbert's Dune series or any of that stuff, anything at all to do with Dune, fire away and let's hear your comments. I've got a wee bit of news for you myself today, which I'll share with you in a wee second. I'm just quickly checking something just to see where we'll be tomorrow night. So this was really one of those wee short episodes, as I said. And tomorrow, I think we're really piling into, tomorrow's night's episode will be Heaven and Hell, the ecology of a desert planet. So again, as before, where we've set up your kind of knowledge of what's going on in the ecological sort of sphere of the world at that time, what Frank's looking at, and his own research. So we're going to see the payoff of this. And there is an initial payoff with this research, by the way, folks, as we talked a wee bit about a book there that's called The Dragon in the Sea. And I'm probably sure that quite a lot of you who've read Frank Herbert's Dune series might not be familiar with it. It's a very, very good book. And part of me, outside of the Dune thing, thinks that it's his best book. But certainly in terms of the environmental themes, the way he's approaching characterization, the whole Jungian thing, the whole psychological thing, and you can get the sort of the dragon in the sea, the worm in the sand kind of thing. So there's an awful lot of ecological connections and, well, several other connections between Dune and the first book, The Dragon in the Sea. I think I mentioned a wee bit about it in that episode. I've got a couple of copies of it. Depending on where you get it, it's that's quite. I really like this cover, by the way. It's a lovely piece of art. I'm not sure who. Like many times on these books, you don't really ever. Cover art shows a print of Underwater Garden by Paul Klee. Oh, there you go, from Paris, 1963. I really like this cover. It's one of my favorites for. It's called The Dragon in the Sea. It's also known as Under Pressure and 21st Century Sub. So all three books are the same book, but I highly recommend it. And I think the best title for it's Under Pressure. To be honest, it really does. It's a great book for tension, especially it's kind of a trait of submarine fiction, if you see what I mean. So yeah, and we get some of Frank's key ideas presented to us here. But we in particular, I think we talk a wee bit about Leah Kynes, who we're going to look at along with his father in quite some detail as we have an episode coming up on the planetologists of Dune. So there we go. So if you do have any questions, fire away, any comments, and I'll give you my wee bit of news, by the way. I think I told you the other day that we couldn't go to see Dune in the local cinema here, that it's not a showing in the local cinema at all. And we were so we had to get our quest on. Hi, Karen. Thanks for joining us. So we've managed to get our tickets booked for Dune as of about an hour ago, I think. You bought the cinema, not necessary, but we but we think we've identified a particular way of seeing it with as few people as possible. And hmm, fingers crossed, Karen, we've figured that one out. I'll tell you what, it'll be on the day of the last episode um, that we're showing on our countdown to June. So that the last episode will be the night. It's on the 21st, so we'll have seen it before the last episode in our last little live segment that we do to go with them. You know, these Q&As. So we'll definitely be able to tell you a little bit about it and give you some opinions on it whenever we do see it. That'll be a week today. So looking forward to it. Yeah, it's myself and my wife are going to see it. And we're not going to get an IMAX. I'm afraid it's just not going to happen. But we are going to see it on one of the bigger cinema screens. So there we go. So looking forward to it, and it's T-minus 7 days, really, I think, for us. So my wife's not that big a Dune fan, by the way. I mean, arguably she's scunnered with Dune, having to listen to me talk about it all the time. So so there we go, folks. So we're rowing our boat gently down the stream till we get there, and hopefully in a week's time we'll have seen Dune in the cinema. All things being safe, I suppose. Excuse me. So we both have agreed that if things go badly or things are a bit super packed or anything like that, we'll happily walk away from the cinema. But yeah, hopefully that won't happen. And yeah, we've got the right kind of seats, if you know what I mean. So not necessary. I wouldn't have bought the cinema, Karen. No, I would have been much more creative than that. But no, that's here's hoping. But anyway, as I said, that was kind of based on the local cinema. It's not showing June. Which just can't believe. So we've got about a 65-mile journey to go see the movie. I think, excuse me, I think there is one slightly closer the other direction, but it's not a great cinema. So no, that's what we're going for. So yeah, looking forward to it, folks. I'll just catch up with the chat here and see what we're saying. I'm seeing The Last Duel tomorrow, says Grimdark Elven Lore Master. It should hold over until June. I saw the trailer for that, Grimdark. It looked quite interesting. Excuse me. It's a Matt Damon film, isn't it? So yeah, Ridley Scott, I believe, isn't it? So yeah, it looks quite decent, actually. I think I saw the trailer for that a wee while back around the same time I saw the trailer for Green Knight, actually, but I was quite surprised that Green Knight didn't end up in the cinema. I think just ended up straight to. Maybe it did actually, and we missed it, you know. But yeah, it looks interesting anyway. Carol said, "Nice, I'm happy for it." Thank you, Carol. Hope to be yeah. Look, as you say, look forward to seeing it once. And is it going to need a second viewing? Ether Prime says, "Good morning, Ether. Only a few minutes to be here tonight. I need to wake up earlier tomorrow." Yeah, it's one of those kind of remember that today is tomorrow's yesterday kind of thing. Carol says, my advice, start planning the second screening. Yeah, I think we'll have to play this. We're playing this a wee bit by ear, but yeah, it'll be our kind of first time out in a long time, Carol, I think. So we're looking forward to it, I think, as a sort of let's get out of here. We might go for a bit of dinner or something. Just generally get out into society for the first time in maybe quite some time. So we are looking forward to it. Brad Rose says, "Hi Brad, sorry to sidetrack so early, but I had a 1 a.m. epiphany the other night. Who knows what darkness lurks inside the heart of man? The shadow knows is so young." Yeah, well, that's very Jungian, isn't it? Where's the quote from, Brad? Is that a Jungian quote, or is that something from Frank? Carol, 100 kilometers sounds like my trips to Austria last month. Brad says 100 kilometers just down the road. Yeah, I suppose bit of a different scale for you guys. Especially if you're in Australia, Brad. Yeah, journeys can be quite epic there, can't they? Well, that's the same for pretty much everyone, isn't it? Yeah, I forget how small a country Ireland is sometimes, but yeah, it's enough for us, I suppose. There we go. But yeah, it's you have to remember these things, don't you? There's lots of differences in scale and yeah, as I always say, there's a scale to life, but it affects us as well, doesn't it? The landscape and so on. Grimdark says, last duel is about the last judicial duel authorized by King Charles VI of France between Jean de Carouge and Jacques Legris in 1386. Last judicial duel authorized by King Charles. Yeah, plenty of dueling goes on after that, I think, but that's maybe just outside of France. But yeah, I know the general gist of the duel. It's quite a famous duel, isn't it? It's an honor duel over a rape, as I recall. But I can't. I don't really know much else about it. I suppose the film will be my educator. Then I must have a wee look at it. But yeah, it certainly looks interesting. Hey Ether, it says Brad, good to see you here as always. Guys saying hello. Isn't that a quote from the pulp classic The Shadow? I don't know. I don't know where that quote's from. Maybe you can enlighten us, Brad. And Ether's saying, hey Brad. And there's David. Hello, David. Thanks for joining us. Good to see all the gang's all here. Yes, indeed. Getting the right wee sort of regular crowd here each night, aren't we? It's good to have you all. It's feeling quite. It reminds me of the days of CB radio and stuff like that, and which would, I suppose, again not be the same in Northern Ireland as it would have been elsewhere, if you see what I mean. Grimdark Elven Lore Master says, Froissart's Chronicles talks about the details of the duel. He's one of the definitive historians on the 100 Years' War as well. Thank you. Thanks, Grimdark. Don't really know too much about that period at all. Yeah, just in terms of my knowledge of that kind of period, it's just kind of reading the literature, I suppose. But I kind of get bored of all the. Yeah, there's parts of history that bore me, and it's quite a long part of European history I see as kind of just being a bit repetitive, with the odd bit of interesting thing going on, But I suppose if I ever looked at it properly, it would be pretty fascinating, if you see what I mean. But sometimes if you got to pick your subjects, if you see what I mean. You've only got X amount of time to look at stuff, So on we go, Brad's. I think we're still not too sure, Brad. Do you know where that quote's from? The one that you brought to the party. Who knows what darkness lurks inside the heart of man? The shadow knows. Your epiphany from 1 a.m. the other night, Brad. I wonder what you're reading. Could be Dune, actually, couldn't it? Froissart's Chronicles talks about the details of Julie's one of the definitive historians of the 100 Years' War. I had to read Froissart for some medieval classes I took. Oh, excellent. Very good. Studying medieval history, I'm assuming, yeah? Brad Rose. Here we go. Brad says, The Shadow was a pulp comic that heavily influenced Batman. In some stories, it was a shadow movie. The Shadow more the Wayans went to see when the M&D got knocked off. The Wayans went to see when the M&D got knocked off. Can you expand that acronym for me, Brad? The M&D. Not too sure what you mean. But that pulp comic book, The Shadow, is that? Have we seen a film of that? I must have a wee quick look. See, is that sounds familiar? Not The Shadow. No, The Shadow. Oh, gotcha. Yep. Yes, I know who you mean. Sorry, having a blip. Yes, I know The Shadow. Yeah. That's where that comes from. Interesting. Yes, there was a Shadow movie. That's just having a wee quick look at the comics there. Don't think the film did too well. It was one of those kind of that ilk of those kind of sort of, I don't know, obscure kind of, not obscure, I suppose, but do you remember things like Darkman that was it a Sam Raimi film with Liam Neeson, and it didn't really do too well. It's those kind of almost 30s type, Shadows turned into many ways radio shows in their golden ages. Solomon Kane might be my favorite pulp. See, I was chatting about this, Grimdark. I don't kind of consider published in the pulps, maybe, I suppose, but I don't consider Robert E. Howard a pulp writer. If you see, I mean, I can as much as maybe that's where his Mum and Dad. Thank you, Brad. As much as that's where his kind of a lot of his stuff is published, I think with time passing, I still think of him as a pretty good literary writer. Well, I see pulps is stuff that gets pulped because it's not sold enough, I suppose. Always got the sense of reprocessed, if you see what I mean. Let me just catch up a wee bit, folks. Taking mum and dad went to see when the mum and dad got knocked out. Some suppose it was a shadow movie. Wayne's went to see. Right, got you. The shadow movie that the Bruce Wayne's parents went to see when the Wayne's went to see when the mum and dad got knocked up. I think, if I'm following that correctly, the influence of Batman, etc., in the story. And there was right, got it. Thank you very much, Brad. Let's see. Yeah, Solomon Kane. I haven't read too many of the Solomon Kane's grimdark, by the way. I think I read about one ages ago. Again, just the sort of missing gap books in my library, but the odd story in the collection. But I did watch the film a wee while back with James Purefoy, and I thought it was really good. I really enjoyed it. Absolutely enjoyed it. Thought it was really, I thought it was excellent, actually. And I thought maybe a lot of people wouldn't have got it, but I did like it a lot. Pardon me. Yeah, Ether Prime, that kind of Dick Tracy, the Rocketeer, the Shadow. There was a couple that I'm thinking of as well. That popped into my head, but I really like the Rocketeer, and the sort of we've seen the original sort of Dick Tracy ones, and then there's the Dick Tracy cartoons. But I've seen them when I was growing up. I thought they were quite good. I really enjoyed them. That's usually one of Dick Tracy's sidekicks, but it's all the villains in there. I thought they were excellent. The Rocketeer technically was more pulp tribute to the golden age of comics. Things like Doc Savage, I suppose, maybe a little bit later, but I'm trying to think of that sort of era. And there was some that popped in. Oh, I know what I was thinking about. Isn't there an original Sandman? Not the current Sandman, if you see what I mean. Kind of World War I kind of type of comic book hero. And I thought it's in a similar vein to those kind of things. Doc Savage. I like Doc. I've been thinking about doing a wee video on Buckaroo Banzai, guys, because I believe that there's a new book, which is I don't know if you know Buckaroo Banzai Adventures Across the Eighth Dimension, but at the end of the film, it's a bit like a James Bond film. It kind of says that Buckaroo Banzai will return in, I think, is it Adventures Against the World Crime League or something? I can't remember exactly. And so this book has been written finally. I think it's just about to be published. And maybe they're going to finally get our Buckaroo Banzai sequel because I love Buckaroo Banzai. I think it's great. And if anybody hasn't seen Buckaroo Banzai, get your weird on and watch that film. It's fantastic. And John Lithgow's everybody's pretty good in it, but John Lithgow's excellent. I think it's really funny. Pulp's class of books, often American novels, which are considered to be unliterary by snobs who publish books. Doc Savage too. Yeah, so again, I wouldn't. Yeah, I think his writings, regardless of what sort of happens to the publication method, his writing's too good. I think he has got his literary chops, as I would say. Doc Savage. Yeah, Robert E. Howard took his life when he was only 30. So it's quite a sad and bizarre kind of thing, actually, Brad, to be honest with you. Alex Raymond for Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers also for Sci-Fi Pulp. Oh, what's the guy that writes Buck Rogers? Is it Nolan? Something. Goodness, let me see. Hang on. This one tell you. Oh, the original Buck Rogers. What's that? It's I can never remember books whenever they put numbers on them. The name of it, Armageddon, something, isn't it? Armageddon 2419. It's Philip Francis Nolan, Buck Rogers, the original Buck Rogers story. Big fan of Buck Rogers, by the way. All forms of Buck Rogers. Love Buck. I really like Flash Gordon as well, to be honest with you. I brought up on those black and white serials, the old cliffhangers. Absolutely love them. I've got one of them somewhere downstairs, actually, on DVD. I think a lot of them are on kind of those streaming shows these days. But yeah, Buckaroo Banzai's got a bit of Doc Savage about him. Those kind of heroes. Even Austin Powers is almost a bit, and Armand Flint. These kind of things. They're brain surgeons plus rock stars plus save the world type. multi-talented polymath guys, but they're actually kind of a culmination of all of the different types of science fiction hero. They're I suppose, what are they? They're the Edisonade, if you like, where that idea of the Edisonade, where the inventor hero kind of thing, and he's got the sidekick who's the scrapper. They kind of combine them all in one, where the Edison, it's a new type of hero where the inventor is the hero, but he's also ready to slug it out and play a bit of guitar on stage and invent a new invention that will make his fortune. This kind of thing. So yeah, Buckaroo Banzai is fantastic. And definitely a Doc Savage thing connection there. Let me see, just to catch up, folks. Alex Raymond, did you have a chance to read the New York Times article from last night about Danny Villeneuve? I did, actually, and I caught some other stuff that you were sending me there, Carol. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's good lengthy article. You sent me something else as well. I had a nosy at, I think. But yeah, thank you. If you don't mind, keep sending me stuff like that, because I am interested and I want to read it, but I kind of don't troll the internet for that kind of thing, if you see what I mean. I don't really do that, but it's thank you very much for pointing some of this stuff out to me. Like, it does help me. Yeah, I'm into all things Dune. I like to always present balanced arguments, and it's good to see other people's viewpoint and what ignites what people about Dune, what really gets them going. What fascinates them. So no, as I said, Karen, at this point, and funnily enough, I did a watch of Lawrence of Arabia the other night, the original, the original one with the cinematic break and all on it, and I really enjoyed looking at that and was kind of thinking, yeah, I've never seen Lawrence of Arabia on a big screen, but wow, it would be impressive, some of the things that David Lean captured out there in the desert. So I'm genuinely looking forward to having I think the last film that did this to me, that blew my face off in a cinema, literally blew my face off, was well, not literally, sorry, but I was thinking about another film for a second there, but it was Mad Max Fury Road, and just the whole the visceral experience, if you see what I mean. So I know it's not going to be the same thing, but I really am looking forward to see it on a big screen, as I say. Chris Gibbs says, I remember watching Doc Savage, Man of Bronze. Yeah, I think that, I'm not sure if there's one or two. There's definitely one film, Chris, and there might be more than one. I can't remember, but it's been donkey's years since I've seen it. I'd love to see stuff like this on the streaming services. Netflix has got a cult film section. It's about like, you could be populating that with stuff that's really good, things like that. But yeah, again, if anybody hasn't read, I'm not sure who the author of the Doc Savage books is, guys, but Doc Savage, Man of Bronze, check him out. Absolutely great stuff. And yeah, very much in a vein of a tradition, like evolving heroes. David says, I was reminded recently of a great quote from a Solomon Kane book, The Coming of Solomon. Really nails the character in a short line for me. Quote to follow. Thank you, David. I'll read that out when you get it in there. Armageddon something. Armageddon. What's that reference to? Carol, you're laughing. Keith. Hi, Keith. Keith Kolb says, right when I thought I'd be able to listen to one of these tonight, co-worker comes in and asks to explain some of the code. Hi and bye, everyone. Oh, sorry to hear that, Keith. I would have handed them a textbook. Oh, no, that's terrible of me. Let me just catch up, folks. Let me see. Is this the quote about Solomon, David? What did you think about the casting of Solomon Kane of James Purefoy? I thought that was bang on. I think he's really good in these kind of films, if you see what I mean. Slowly he rose, mechanically wiping his hands upon his cloak. A dark scowl had settled on his sombre brow. Yet he made no wild, reckless vow, swore no oath by saints or devils. Men shall die for this, he said coldly. Yeah. Yeah, I have to say that as I said, I've only read the one, and I think it was I don't know which one it would have been. One set of stories of Solomon Kane a long, long time ago, to the point where I wouldn't remember it. But so my recent experiences of watching the film, and I have it on DVD, so I've watched it 3 or 4 times, and it's got Pete Postlethwaite in it, etc. So I think it's really good. But yeah, it's definitely, as I said, guys, I'm reading kind of my way through a lot of the old Conan stories and a lot of the old Lovecraft stories, and I'm kind of on the Arabian Nights third volume of the Arabian Nights that I have, and Dune as well. I'm reading an awful lot of stuff, but it's good to read these kind of things, the individual stories. Um, but yeah, I'm thinking on doing some audio stuff with some of this quite soon, whenever I can get my head to clear. Get some stuff done for you guys on the station, you know. Let's scroll down a wee bit. Alex Raymond. Is this the guy behind the comic books of the Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers? Died in a car accident in his 40s. He never finished Flash Gordon. Flash Gordon is really Flash Gordon comes after Buck Rogers, isn't it? Buck's kind of the archetype there, but I'd argue that Flash Gordon's much more famous than Buck Rogers. I'd say, despite the TV show of the 80s and stuff like that, which I absolutely adore. Space disco at its finest. I absolutely love it. The whole Princess Ardala coming down, you know, and hey, do you know how to boogie? It's just mega cheese. It's great. It's I think the original, you know, the Buck Rogers TV series with Gil Gerard and Aaron Gray. I think it's got one of the finest title sequences to a TV show ever, and I really did like the South Park parody of it with "Go God Go." I split myself when I saw that. I don't know if you have seen what I'm talking about, guys. It's very funny. Thank you for that quote, David. That's, yeah, Solomon Kane's what we were talking about, that guys there. That was a quote that kind of, as David says, is a good representation of the character. Brad says, back to the topic, sort of. Here in Australia, there are lots of positives about eating kangaroo. The health benefits, low in fat, high in protein, but more so the environmental impact. Don't know, have I had kangaroo? I don't think I have. But yeah, I imagine you farm kangaroo and all sorts of things out there, Brad. I think I remember being in Berlin in an Australian restaurant, and oh no, I have had kangaroo. I think I had a roux burger possibly, but there was all sorts of straight, you know, interesting things on the menu. But that was a long time ago, about 2000. I don't know, 2003 or something like that, I think. Yeah. Ether Prime says, if you love pulp, absolutely check out the Rage Holic on YouTube. I think you mentioned that the other day. I don't know the Rage Holic, but I'll give it a go. Always interested in I suppose this kind of content, etc., that I'm putting out myself. But yeah, one of the most poignant and outspoken comedians. Oh, he's a comedian, right? Okay. I like the comedy. I watched Dave Chappelle's new show the other day. I thought that was pretty good. Very interesting. Yeah, the one on Netflix. Don't see a lot of comedy these days. I do like comedy, but I'm trying to think of the last comedian I went to see was probably Jimmy Carr, I think. But yeah, I've scribbled that down. Thank you, Ethan. I will check it out. Karen says, "Oh yeah, Lawrence of Arabia never stopped looking impressive." I was kind of interested actually to watch it again just to see what I knew of Lawrence and how the film presented him, because I'd seen it a long time ago but couldn't really remember. And yeah, I think it's not a totally accurate picture. In fact, I'd say it's quite far from it, to be honest, of Lawrence of Arabia, but it's a view of him, I suppose, a snapshot. But yeah, it was a really enjoyable film. I thought it was excellent. Ethan Prime says he hates The Witcher because... Who hates The Witcher? Because it's a... Do you hate The Witcher? Oh, sorry, he hates The Witcher. I'm not sure who you mean, Ether, because it's a rip-off of... Oh, is that me you're talking about? Possibly. I'm not sure. Who hates The Witcher because it's a rip-off of Elric of Melniboné? Not sure who we're talking about. I do love Elric of Melniboné, I have to say. I think it's more Game of Thrones is much more of a rip-off there, I think, as well. I think I've seen The Witcher, the TV series. I have one of the books, the first book, but I've never read it. Just haven't. It's just picked it up in a shop, and I've just not got around to it. But I really enjoyed the series. I thought it was pretty good. But I think it's more just the character of the what's his name, Geralt. Gerard. Looks a lot. I suppose it's the character, but if it's also an opposite. I suppose he's more of a combination of Conan and Elric of Melniboné, because Elric of Melniboné has no physicality. He's a very skinny physically weak individual. I think that's something that a lot of people, whenever they paint them, the drawings of Elric, you want to see him quite thin looking. It's the whole point of his character is he's so physically weak he can't lift a sword. So to see him all muscly. But there we go. Just to catch on down a bit, folks, just the one film has made sequels we're discussing there. Arnie might have been involved at some point, but that was a long time ago. Oh, it was that Doc Savage, I think you're talking about, Chris. I hope. It's one of these things where I've got to catch up with the conversation. Dave says, haven't seen the Solomon film, actually. I'm only familiar with the Robert Howard stories. Have to give it a watch. Yeah, do so. It's I think it's pretty much a Genesis story, isn't it? But it's pretty good. I'd say it's not a mega high budget film or anything like that. It's one of those kind of films where you've got quality people in it, and I enjoyed it. Really did enjoy it. Hi Aqua Baby, how's it going? Everyone's saying hello there. Serialized fiction, how goes it? Buck Rogers, also known as the progenitor of the best sci-fi TV show ever made, known as Farscape. Oh, Ether, I love Farscape. Yeah, I've got some very nice editions of Farscape here. I'm going to do some programs on Farscape. I love it. And absolutely right. I totally agree with you. The framework for Farscape's Buck Rogers. Very much so. I think it's very recognizable, but it uses that and just takes it somewhere else altogether. We don't farm the roos so much as snipe them like rabbits. I see. That's why the spelling is rageaholic. What did I write down? Rageaholic. Thank you. Rageaholic. Rageaholic. There we are. Thank you. There we are. I'll check that out. Valyrians and Melnibonians are very similar. Yeah, I think Grimdark, I was actually saying it's possibly even at the end of, I read the books, and there's the horn, isn't it? And if you know how the Elric books end, and we haven't seen George R. Martin's ending of it, but I'd say that Song of Ice and Fire is highly derivative, and not just of the Elric books, I'd say. But yeah, I totally agree that the Valyrians and the Melnibonians are almost identical. And all the Melnibonians are people that just hang about on white hair, almond eyes kind of thing, magical swords, sorcerers, and write about on dragons. Though, in I suppose in Michael Moorcock, the Young Kingdom's Melnibone is meant to be Britain, isn't it? Ether says I was talking about Razor Fist, also known as the Rageaholic. Right. But yeah, and Razor Fist, yeah. I'm going to get myself a cleaner page here. I've got that much. There we go. Yeah, I don't know if anybody remembers the old Buck Rogers. I've got all the old Buck Rogers. The 1980 ones on TV. And my understanding is that Gil Gerard used to come over to Northern Ireland and play golf here quite a bit. I think he still does. Maybe if he's still alive, I'm not too sure. So Grimdark says Howard also wrote these stories for Dark Agnes, which was considered radical feminist fantasy at the time. I don't know any of those, I have to say. I'm looking forward to getting into some of this stuff as well. It's interesting, since I have started doing this, I kind of haven't been near this kind of fiction in about 10 years professionally. And I don't know, really enjoy reading this kind of stuff. So I'm looking forward to getting back at some of the old stuff and trying to find a lot of this stuff in new formats and read it fresh, maybe. So it is interesting when if you haven't been able to read all of the works or something like that, you've read bits in here and there, and then later on in life you go, I really wished I could have read all of them when I was younger. Do you know what? I'll go get them now. I can do it now, Dark Agnes, Dark Lamb. Yeah. But in particular, guys, I think Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft, I think they're biographies. They're interesting men. They're deeply flawed individuals, but they're quite interesting, I think. I use the word interesting a lot. It covers a lot of ground and saves you explaining stuff. Pretty much, yeah, you can be into anything or find it interesting, I suppose. So I hope I'm not using that too much. If you've got any questions, folks, fire them away. Let's have a wee look. Howard also read that one. Radical feminist fantasy for its time. Interesting. Would like to have a look at that. I quite like feminist science fiction. I don't know too much about feminist fantasy literature, for example, but I do like feminist science fiction quite a bit. David says, I've often wondered if it's Frank's enthusiasm for exploring the dunes and branching obsessions from that inspiration, which makes it such an easy target for my joyous obsession. He's clearly passionate. I rarely find something that I sink my teeth into as deeply as Herbert's Dune books. Yeah, I mean, they are deep, and as I said, he interweaves so many things together, David, that I think it is one of those books that if you have any kind of interest in anything in it, it will send you off. And if you just want to know stuff, and even if it's just if it works as an ecological primer, and you weren't familiar with the ecological issues and stuff, it might just send you in the right direction, if you see what I mean. But it can lead you in all sorts of places. And it's taken me. I mean, if you look at the bibliography in the last episode, David, you'll see it's quite a broad range of stuff. It's all over the place, But it's a good point to make, It's good to get. Yeah, there's not too many authors that you can really sink your teeth into, especially if it's a deep book, big book. If it's badly flawed book, you won't enjoy coming back to it time and time again. The fact that these books are so, big, and that we do come back to them, that the level of detail, and that it holds our interest, it is a testimony to his writing. Absolutely. And I think he will be considered a great writer. Yeah, I mean, it's obvious that Dune has its place in history. I think I don't really need to spell it out for anybody. If you see what I mean. The Rageaholic has ranted about similarities between Game of Thrones and Elric quite a bit. A lot of Elric artists give Elric pointed ears, which makes the Melnibonians look elvish. Yeah. Comic adaptations mostly. By elvish, you mean Dark Elder. And the Druchii and Warhammer Fantasy. Elves. Shay, doesn't it? Yeah. It is an interesting. That's what I mean. Elric's. I mean, why is nobody making Elric? If you ask me, what would you like to see on the screen, Russ? In terms of pick a fantasy property, pick a science fiction property, pick a horror property. If you want to go at it like that, the fantasy one, ping Stormbringer. Show me Stormbringer. Put Elric on the screen. Give me that. Michael Moorcock's High Tragedy, just because it belongs up there with Conan and Lord of the Rings and books like that. It's so good, but he's such an iconic character, and I can't believe nobody's made an Elric film yet. Stormbringer, what a great Stormbringer itself. I'd love to see that on the screen. I'd love to see how it could be portrayed on the screen, and how utterly menacing it should be. Should be a sword that makes you crap yourself. I think, incredibly powerful, and to have a character that is a sword, I think. But sorry, I'm gushing a bit about Stormbringer. If you want to know what sci-fi property I'd love to see on the big screen, it's Tiger or The Stars My Destination. I'd love to see either of those. Excuse me, folks. Just catching up with your. But somebody was saying there that the Rageaholic has ranted about the similarities between the Game of Thrones and Elric. There is that horn in those books, of George R.R. Martin's books, and if that's a thing that they blow that horn to, then you could almost go, oh my goodness, what a rip-off. At that point, you can start. If that happened in George R.R. Martin's last book, you can call it a rip-off, rather than being derivative, because there's so much in it that is derivative. And I've read a lot of fantasy over the years, but again, I'm a different generation. So I haven't read a lot of modern fantasy. It's stuff that was coming out of the the 60s, the 70s, and maybe the 80s, that kind of thing. But I kind of got turned off, I think, fantasy probably in the early 90s, and pretty much just stuck to science fiction from then on. I would have read the odd fantasy book, don't get me wrong. But it was just where fantasy was going. I thought it was very poor at the time. I think it was dying a death, of kind of stagnating a bit, Just catching up with your comments, folks. Brad says, it's interesting that in Dune the water is a strong theme, but that I remember there was little mention of salinity. Maybe Arrakis had less salt than Earth. It's an interesting point. Ether Prime says, by the way, I would watch the hell out of a Farscape perspective. I would quite like to do stuff like that, but I would tend to get worried about using clips of films because I'm not really. I know how to reference and run stuff academically, but putting it up here and saying it's academic, there's rules for academics that basically make us bulletproof. But at the same time, I'm not too sure how to go about doing that. But I absolutely love Farscape, and I think it's a very good, very adult show. It's very funny. I think it's one of the funniest things that was on TV at the time. It has its own sense of humor. It goes quite dark in places, and boy, do they know how to the probably the finest modern cliffhangers, I think. And that's what really made Farscape work. It had brilliant cliffhangers, absolutely brilliant, and they ran with them as well. And if anybody doesn't know Farscape, I'd say that it's really good fun. It's kind of like Buck Rogers. It's a bit rude. It's a bit kinky in places. Meets the Muppets, but not really. But stick an 18 certificate on it, and it's really good fun. It's a very well designed show. It's excellent. All the actors are brilliant, and it's just a really good show. It's very well written, very well acted. Everything about it's tip top. And I'd argue it's one of the best TV shows that we've seen in terms of science fiction. And it was a shame how it got shut down, but they did get to finish the story with a film, which is actually good and satisfying to the show. I don't know if anybody would agree with me about that, but I really enjoyed Farscape. Really enjoyed it very much. So I'd love to do some. Well, it's in my A to Z, guys. So I'm going to do some stuff on Farscape, definitely. Finding the time, isn't it? That's kind of why an A to Z did an A to Z. I'll pick something out of that each time as I make a video, and we'll keep at it, you know. But I've plenty of other things to do as well. I could have made about 20 A to Zs easily. Try Dark Elves and D&D are also based on Melnibonians, not just Norse Dark Elves. Yeah, I'm going back to my Dungeons and Dragons, Dres to Erden and all of this kind of stuff in the I did read a lot of the old Dungeons and Dragons novels, you know, the Dragonlance ones and the oh goodness, what would they be called? Well, the Dres to Erden ones, they were quite good. I enjoyed them. A whole bunch of them came out at the time for a sort of second edition. The Moonshay ones as well were a bit. Read a lot of that stuff back in the day. Back in the day, says Chris Gibson. Junior referred to Farscape as the Blue Lady show. I'm watching it again. Would enjoy Farscape content. Yeah, the Blue Ladies. Well, it's got a great cast. I don't know. Who is it? Shiana, is it? Shiana? Is that? I'm getting names mixed up. I think she's grey, isn't she? And then we get a red chick, don't we? I don't know. There's a few different colours. But yeah, it's good. It's quite it goes a bit sexy on it sometimes, doesn't it? It's a bit rude, in a funny way, I think. But it's very good show. I would be a Farscape movie would be pretty good, wouldn't it? I'd be happy if it made after the end of SJW movies. I missed something here back in the Farscape was the Blue Lady show. I'm watching again. Chris back to his old tricks. I'd be happy if it is made after the end of SJW movies. What's that? Social Justice Warrior movies, is that? I've lost your thread there, Ether. Sorry about that, it happens. Catching up, guys. I'll pile on down. Grimdark says, I think Jerry Cornelius got a film for Moorcock's work, but no. Really? Seriously? I'll have a look at that. I did not know there's a Jerry Cornelius film. So again, one of the eternal champions. It should be a sword that makes you crap yourself. Yeah, totally. I'd argue that Stormbringer itself is one of the finest monsters ever. You know, you can up there with Dracula, Frankenstein, the Shrike if you want, but it's tip top to them all. It's a weapon that wouldn't be out of place sitting next to the God Emperor, if you see what I mean. It is that kind of thing. It's I don't know. There's multiple incarnations of this weapon in the multiverse, but none of them tip Stormbringer. I think it's a utterly evil thing. It's very cool though. But yeah, you should absolutely shit yourself if you saw Stormbringer. I think that totally. You know, the bane of the black sword. It's That's a great. Yeah, I'd love. Oh, absolutely. It would be. I see if you put it on now, people will be going, "Oh, that's derivative of Game of Thrones, and that's derivative of this." And it's kind of a thing that people will be doing with Dune, isn't it? Oh, Dune's derivative of Star Wars and all this, and it's kind of sometimes when things become fall into the public's awareness, it's not quite lines up with a real chronology, if you like, you know. Excuse me, folks. I'm going to take a wee slug of cough medicine. I'm still not still not 100% better, and I've figured out that there's something quite good for clearing my head out, and I don't have any of it left. So, trip to the pharmacy tomorrow. Excuse me a wee second. It's kind of my point, Grimdark. You think Jerry Cornelius, Behold the Man, Ericos, Hawkman, they'd all make. You could run them as TV series. You could run them as films. There's a whole range of Michael Moorcock properties that would be just fantastic on the screen. You know, the Oswald Bastable, is that what you call him? The Nomad of the Airstreams, those as well. But there we go. Reese XBL. Hi, Reese. Says, love your videos and everything you speak about. I'm from Northern Ireland. It's good seeing people from here like you doing YouTube and things like this. Thank you very much, Reese. That's very kind of you to say so. I don't always present Northern Ireland in the best of lights, but as well, I apologise for that. But thanks very much. If you've got any questions about Dune or the ecological theme that we're talking about tonight, or anything at all, we tend to move on to different, many threads that, as we've pointed out, that can lead us from here and there and everywhere with Dune. So if you do have any questions, fire away. But yeah, thank you very much. So it should be a sword that makes you crap yourself. Made you laugh, says David. Absolutely. I love Stormbringer. Beautiful sword, actually. There's some of the armor he said made versions of it, I think. Turin and Grimdark says Turin and Children of Hurin from Tolkien also has a cursed black sword from Gurthang. Both Moorcock and Tolkien take from the Kalevala. Yeah, isn't that a Finnish? I may be wrong. I think it's a Scandinavian poem, epic, or possibly saga. But it's also, isn't it, a broken sword thing? I think it's mainly where I might be a long time since I looked at this stuff, Grimdark. But it might be that the idea of the broken sword that Aragorn has, I think, possibly comes from the Kalevala. I'm not sure. Been a long time since I looked at this. There was I can't remember his name. I must get his name and look it up. But when I was doing my PhD, there was on Dune, there was another chap doing almost the same thing, but on from ecological on Lord of the Rings. So there you go. I lost contact with him. I'm sure he's done quite well, and that was his thing. So yeah, he would have been the person to ask about that, I think. Ethan Prince's lovable cast. I even love rides. Oh yes, back to Farscape. We were talking about Farscape there for a wee bit, folks. Chiana is the Gregor. Yes, Chiana. There's a great set of characters. The interesting thing about Farscape is it works against the engineer paradigm that you kind of find in Star Trek, where Star Trek presents a bunch of people in space all working together in an excellent way to solve their problems. Farscape's about a dysfunctional crew that often pull apart and work against each other, but somehow they get through it, if you like, you know. I was very pleased. I was talking about William Shatner coming back to Earth there last night, I think, with the kind of cut off, or the rude cut off that we saw on the TV. And where we saw that was just it. It just cut off and just thought it was appallingly rude. So it was good that we saw a bit of William Shatner on American TV today. We really just wanted to check him out, that he was okay and got to say what he'd wanted to say at the time. So we're quite pleased about that. I think it looked like a good experience for him. Let's see. Oh yeah, what's really annoying for me is I've got a lot of the Stormbringer books here, and I'm missing one, and I'm not. I think it's the first one. Which is it? Bear with me a wee second. Is it Stormbringer itself? No, it's not. Hang on. The Black Sword, perhaps. Yeah, I don't see it there. I think the one I'm missing is the Bane of the Black Sword. There we go. Or is it Elric and Melt the Bones? The first. There you go. That's Stormbringer. And again, these kind of books, they're great. Michael Moorcock just churned these out, you know. It's a reasonably decent sized print, if you can see it. But that's a couple of 250 odd pages. Well, this is the last one, isn't it? After 5 many books. So I think there's 6 original ones. Elric and Melnibone, The Sailor on the Seas of Fate, The Weird of the White Wolf, The Vanishing Tower, The Bane of the Black Sword, Stormbringer, and Elric at the End of Time. There's quite a few there. we've got 1, 2, we've got 5 of the originals. I must be missing 2. I'll just put this back, but oh, there's a good one. There's a few other Elric books about over the years, and I think there's probably a couple that I haven't read but that kind of fit. And who's the artist here? This is Robert Gould. Gives you a wee bit of a sense of Elric there. I don't know if you can see that okay. There we go. That's the Revenge of the Rose. Really good art. Quite gaunt about the face. I still think he's a bit too muscly, if you see what I mean. But yes, check out the Elric books or any of the Eternal Champion books. I've read loads of them over the years. But basically, the idea is it's the same character and the multiverse is reincarnated continually. So it's a way to milk an idea, isn't it? Let me just catch up, folks. Chana's one of your childhood crushes. Quite like Aaron Sun myself, actually. I'd argue I'd probably have I wouldn't say childhood, but quite liked all the ladies in Farscape. Blue women and red women and stuff like that. Great, fantastic. David says, I love the dressed books. Don't know if I can fully justify this, but my mental image of a homeworld Tylaxia as a dragon. Whenever you read something, it's whatever in your mind, you know. Ether Prime says, yeah, an Elric movie made after this current terrible era of modern woke movies. Yeah, and it's Elric's an anti-hero in a way. He's a very sympathetic hero. But he's the Dragonlance, Brad says the Dragonlance cartoon movie is on YouTube. So bad it's good. I've seen it. Brad, it's appalling, isn't it? Really, and they got some good voice actors, I think, isn't it? Who is it? It's the what do you call him? Kiefer Sutherland, isn't it? I think doing wrestling or something. I can't remember, but it was. I think it was not a great cartoon at all. So bad it's good. I think if you hadn't seen any of the Dragonlance stuff, I think you just think this is awful. I don't know. I think if you'd enjoyed playing the games or reading the novels, I did play the Dragonlance campaigns. Really, they're good games to play. Grimdark says, but yeah, David says, heck, I'm going to have to check it out. Stormbringer, I haven't read it. If my favorite Moorcock book, is it here? There we go. My understanding is this is part of the Eternal Champion as well as one of the Card Golgar books, but it's a read-alone book. It's called Behold the Man. That's a time travel book. This is my favorite Moorcock book. And this book has a story about it. Once upon a time, The Time Dweller, it's a collection of short stories. Really good. Really good. The deep fixes in here and stuff like that. Time Dweller, Tale of Scarface Brooder. I was halfway through this book on a trip to the Aran Islands off the west coast of Ireland. And the boat goes up like that, and I was hanging on at the very front of the boat, and that book was in my pocket. And whatever way the boat went up, I lost my balance and slid from the front of it's like a ferry boat all the way to the back and hit the tires, on my backside, and the book flew out of me, and it just one of those just flew out of my pocket and into the sea, and bye bye. It was the only thing I brought with me to read on this island. Absolutely got it, and it took me some years a couple of years to track down the book again to actually finish it. I was gutted, but it was a funny thing, if you know what I mean. But that's The Time Dweller's a good read. And Moorcock's great. Highly recommend it. But yeah, the Stormbringer books are a really good place to jump into the Eternal Champion. But definitely check it out. Grimdark says, I know BBC got the rights to the Runestaff novels for Hawkman, but it might be only option for TV. I think I don't want to see BBC adaptations of any good literature these days. It's they can stick to Charles Dickens if you like, but that's I think all they do well. Not really a big fan of the BBC anymore. And the Jerry Cornelius film is called The Final. Oh, it is The Final Program, right? Okay, thank you. Grimdark, is that on YouTube? Is it? Did you say? Got The Final Program downstairs. Jerry A. Cornelius. Things you miss, eh? So much out there. Besides, is there another author who has a more alpha male name than Michael Moorcock? I don't know, has Roger Moore written any books? Alpha males, yeah. Chris Gibson says, I always thought that the Chinese agent would have made an interesting film. Cavella's a Finnish epic. Ah, thank you, Grimdark. Well, memory's not too bad, is it? He Brad says, apparently I suck to go see Marvel and DC movies with. I'm the one who knows the history of all the characters and do the that's different to the comics things a lot. I get that a lot because I'm a bit like that with books, and or tend to point, oh no, that shouldn't happen. Yeah, it's one of those things. But also you got to accept that things that you're going to see on the screen are going to be a little bit different, than books and comics and things like that. I think somebody was talking about Zack Snyder. Is it Zack Snyder that directed 300 the other day? And so I'm well versed in the kind of the Spartan thing, and I understand where Frank Miller, and I love the Frank Miller, but and I actually thought that was a cracking try to take in a graphic novel and putting it on the screen. It really worked very well, and I thought it was arguably the thing that's come closest to a really good adaptation in terms of book to film. But often there's such a different medium. I think that there's always going to be changes. I haven't really got into the DC movies one. Is that Aquaman would be one of those, the Jason Momoa one? We watched that not too long ago, and that was a good, enjoyable family entertainment film. I thought it was a good laugh. But the new Superman, the new Batman, just Batmaned out. I think. I think I'm not too super. Yeah, pretty much Supermaned out, and I'm totally Spider-Maned out as well. But there you go, folks. Dealing with dunes, apparently eucalyptus trees were shipped to America to help as they were suited to arid regions, but they created the issues of fires. The oil in the trees make them explode. Interesting. Yeah, barrier grasses. Everything that had happened, and I suppose I can give you a wee bit. Maybe you guys know this, and if you're American, you're probably taught this in your history. But the reason, the whole sort of connection between the end of World War One, the sort of development of the combine harvester as a piece of technology, the over farming of particularly wheat, the knock on effect of those prices of that commodity, and ultimately you get the Wall Street crash, and then you have your Dust Bowl, and there's a really good example within American history of a mini environmental disaster created within a few years, and it's just basically ignoring kind of thousands of years of common sense about farming and like crop rotation, what you do to the soil, and it ended up the Dust Bowl. I still think it's incredible to look at myself. I just wow, look at that, and look on the size of America and the scale of that sort of desertification, and the fact that there's the grasses. It made sense actually. The idea of planting, you need grasses with deep roots, and that's kind of why all the dust just came off, really. If you know what I mean. But it is an example of that kind of environmental disaster in modern times. But that's a good, yeah. I think whenever I talk about the introduction of cane toads, Brad, into the Australia, is coming up whenever we're starting to really look into the ecology and etc. I might have covered that already, but it's the idea of invasive species. In fact, no, I think it's yet to come actually. Whenever we're looking at the worms, but dealing with dunes, apparently eucalyptus trees were shipped to America to help us. This, yeah. And all sorts of I've seen some interesting photographs lately of how kind of things like oils and trees naturally spilled out into kind of water deltas and so on, and the fact that some people have been photographing these things with drones. If you know what I mean, it's really, they're really quite pretty to look at. But yeah, there's always everything has its own thing, if you see what I mean, and there's always a consequence to your actions. That's what I was talking about people up with somebody there from Northern Ireland, and they were talking about this. There's an ecological grip on the north coast at the minute, and they're dealing with a sort of a small localized environment that has changed over the last 100 years, and they're going out to flatten out and basically destroy it and attempt to return the previous environment. What you understand, and their heart's in the right place, but what they're doing is completely wrong. And in that 100 years since that old environment has gone, this is the environment that has successfully replaced it. And there's all these new living things there. And they're going to flatten out and kill all this stuff because, in their mind, to be environmental is to put it back the way it was. And you can't turn back time. And, it is interesting that there's a lot of bad ideas about ecology out there. And this is all to do with them wanting to kind of you've seen the picture of the place up there that where I got married there, Mussenden Temple. It's up around there, and it's all really to do with providing places for people to walk in amongst this stuff. So it's just a wee example of even on a local level, small. Every little. Do you know where does that come from? Do you know? Have you heard the expression "every little bit helps," as the old woman said when she pissed in the sea? It's sometimes substitute a cat for an old woman sometimes, but it's that kind of thing, and it's also it's kind of the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So it's one of the things that Herbert talks. We mentioned it briefly in the episode that Herbert talks about Western man, particularly systemic thinking, inflicts himself upon the environment, and it's the idea in particular, as we're going to see with late kinds and all of these ecological ideas, that the Western approach is systemic, it's mechanical, and it's short-sighted in particular. I think and it was just a thing that was on the news the other day here, that absolutely just made me go ping. There you go. That's relevant. There it is. It's all and it's happening, and it's the wrong kind of thinking. If you see what I mean. Frank Herbert said he had a great concern for posterity, and lamented that posterity doesn't vote. Yeah, it's hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? But it depends, I suppose, on how it's also the idea that if we don't learn from our mistakes, that we're condemned forever to repeat them. And it's interesting. Particularly, I see a lot of journalistic articles these days, and they're putting stuff up. And you have to remember that there's always a new generation coming along that doesn't know this stuff. But sometimes they're putting things up there like it's a brand new discovery. And I go to my wife. There's this thing here on the news, and they're going blah blah blah, and I go, that happened 30 years ago. What are they talking about? This isn't new. And I kind of wonder about it sometimes, David says, I wonder about Frank's writing process, how long he'd been developing it, what original ideas survived to the final story, how quickly and frequently he wrote, and with what tools, etc. Hashtag Sharthas. There's a fair bit about Frank's writing process. I think if you kind of look at The Road to Dune, and what else did we say? Dreamer of Dune will have wee bits about this by Brian Herbert, the biography, but The Road to Dune, which is Frank Herbert, Kevin J. Anderson, and Brian Herbert, has some wee insights, and particularly I think I mentioned it's to do with this article, but we talked a wee bit about it the other day, how it particularly uses Jungian mandalas and all of that stuff that we were talking about, the characterization for Dune, guys. It's not just Dune that he uses that for, and that's kind of why we were talking about the dragon in the sea there. It's a methodology that he approaches his work with, and we talked about different kind of ways of using system to put psychology, etc. So he uses it for shading, for tone, to flesh out the characters, to create pairings, and it's a thing that he sticks with, I think. So in terms of his writing process, David, he has said a couple of other things, and if you actually look at the footnotes and stuff, for example, he talks about writing like this and then transforming the prose into haiku before turning it back into whatever becomes his story. As I have a wee footnote there, simply put, I've investigated that and can find no evidence. All I've said is it's not. I didn't say it's true or it's not. Not having enough information, I said I've got no evidence for it. So there are things about Frank that he's a great self-publicist, and he likes a bit of the air of mystique about him, I think. But he also at the same time says, I'm not starting a cult, don't follow me, and so he's a bit give and take with some of it, if you see what I mean. He's a very interesting man. I don't know if any of you have looked at some of the newsreels. There's some of the stuff where you can hear him talking, and he's very crisp and quick to the point, and that's the way it is. And I'm quite impressed sort of watching him talk about, and he's there to sell his book or his idea, but They're usually little 5-minute type slots where he's being interviewed on the news. So they're well worth looking at. There's a bunch of them on YouTube. So you can get a wee bit of a. At the same time, he's in publicity mode, but it's good to get a wee bit of a sense of him. But he does talk a wee bit about his writing style, and I think he's quite professional about it and how he goes about getting X amount of words and stuff. The other thing, David, is that he does discuss that Frank had a lot of bother getting short story word lengths. So a lot of what was meant to be short stories, which kind of do end up as short stories, get turned into novels about a year later. And you'll see that with The Green Brain, for example, short story, then a novel. Quite a lot of them, it's publication short story, published as a novel the next year. So I think he's much happier writing in a longer medium. I'm someone like that. I can't, it's quite funny. I teach a lot of students, and if they have to do something particularly big, might be 5,000 words. And I probably couldn't introduce myself in 5,000 words, if you see what I mean. I'm very much a long-term operator these days. I like big projects, if you know what I mean. But I can't be that succinct anymore, I suppose. I probably could, actually, but I wouldn't enjoy it. But yeah, so there's a good bit on record, David, about his writing techniques. Not all of it, I'm sure, is bang on, but who knows? Grimdark Elven Lore Master says it's not the power corrupts, it's instead power attracts the corruptible. That's Frank's thinking on it. Yes, indeed. And I think he also talks about having never, worked on different political campaigns and stuff, and that, as far as I can tell, is a matter of pride with Frank Herbert that no political campaign, nobody that he wrote speeches or anything like that ever actually got elected. If you see what I mean. Power attracts pathological personalities. Oh, I missed something. Sorry, hang on. Jump back, Grimdark. Man's incredible hubris about knowing how to shape the environment is only outmatched by the stupidity of the activists who think mankind should end to make way for nature. Extinction Rebellion, for example. Well, that's kind of, if that's what they think, that's kind of real stupid. But mankind is natural, and we shouldn't make way for nature, but we should absolutely accommodate it and live in symbiosis with it, I think. Power attracts pathological. It's an interesting word, pathology, sympathy, empathy, pathos, suffering, isn't it? Both statements are true. Have kids, then talk to me about the corruption of a common. You want to do one thing, the spouse tells you you promise to do another, then your children need your attention. Yeah, family life is kind of, all things like that, isn't it? Let me just hang on. There we go. I think I've caught up. Have I caught up? It looks like I've caught up, folks. Yeah, there we go. So we're cruising along to it's coming up to about 20 past 11 here. So we'll go on for a wee bit longer. As I said, looking forward to the film. And if you do have any questions where you're at, fire them away or give us your comments. It's an easy lesson in how power corrupts. After all, the family is the smallest community. Yes. I suppose that mainly, particularly throughout a long time, it's the family unit that's arguably the enemy of centralized power. If you take a look at families as tribes or clans or this kind of thing, And still, it's a pretty strong unit actually today, the family unit. It's interesting. Excuse me, English fact, folks. So there we go. Pardon me. But yeah, I don't know what you think about. I said we're about to see some of the directly go into the ecology of Dune itself next episode. I said this was a little short one, just really to give you, this is it, this is the beginning, this is the origin, and we're going to pile into looking at the ecology of the heaven and hell, I think is the way we put it. Does anybody get the reference? Heaven and hell, the ecology of a desert planet. That was Ether's off to bed, so good night, Ether. Take it easy, Ether. Ecology of a desert planet. And then we're going to have a wee look at the planetologists of Dune. We're going to look at how they use the Fremen. Particularly, we're going to have an episode on the Fremen and how they're used as geomorphic agents. And we're also actually, here's one. Are you still there, Caron? I know you've seen the film. Did some or has anybody seen the film there? No, I take it the banquet scene is not in the movie. I understand. If that's the case, we've got an examination of the banquet scene as well, which is really important. Where in terms of learning the ecological lessons from Frank Herbert, that's where he sets them out quite a bit. So yeah, good night, Ether. It must be quite early in the morning there, actually, isn't it? But happy snoozy time. Take it easy. Brad says the Aboriginal Australian people manage their lands. Yeah, it's most people do manage their lands quite well, I think. Is that the episode there that we just looked at today? We've got some examples of the Bedouin there, I believe, and I think some great pictures of the Bedouin. I've credited the photographer there. They're fantastic. And there's a couple, I think, of the Bushmen of Southern Africa, which is the other major. These two groups in particular, the biggest kind of influence on the Fremen. But yeah, I suppose the ability to live within your own small area of environment, and work the energy of that system, I suppose, and do it in symbiosis with nature. It is interesting. There we go. But I'll tell you what, folks, I will run for another 10 minutes myself, take us up to past on the hour here. So if you do have any other wee comments, I think Caron's maybe away, but which is a pity because he has seen the film 3 or 4 times. But I don't know if is there anybody else there that has seen it, knows if the banquet scene is in the movie. Sean McAllister, hi Sean, says the Americas were also managed landscapes. I live in Arizona, and I find many aspects of indigenous management interesting. One example, there are rock formations shaped to capture rainwater. Yeah, yes, indeed. And you get a lot of examples of this kind of these structures, for example, old structures to capture rainwater in the Middle East, and Africa are quite impressive. But to actually have the natural formations, it's very interesting. We've I suppose that the whole nature of that in Ireland's long gone. But we have not too far from here, I suppose. Up where I'm from originally is a place called Coleraine. It's near the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. At a wee point just off of Coleraine is a place called let me see, Mount Sandal. Mount Sandal is where the first people came into Ireland, and it's their habitations were out there at the River Bann, which is the entrance just at the very top of Northern Ireland. You'll see the River Bann comes in. It's just a wee bit down there next to Coleraine. Coleraine means Nook of the Fern, and it's at that point we're arguably the oldest inhabitants in Ireland, and we have a settlement there dated somewhere, I think, between around 10,000 BC to maybe 9,000, 8,000, so around that period. And in terms of what you're saying, Sean, there is evidence just in how they lived, and evidence of their food production, their food storing, etc., and quite an old culture. We have several different ancient cultures move through here. But that kind of thing, yeah, there's all sorts of things. There's some culture in Africa, and their cattle, they tap blood, and they use a wee sort of stick, just lets the blood out of the cattle, and they make their blood sausages from it, and it just naturally heals over. And whatever way, it's a bit like letting with leeches or something like that, and it keeps the animal alive. They don't actually slaughter their animal. There are so many ways of approaching, all sorts of things, farming, as you say, managing your landscapes in particular. And if you look at some of the photos that we've got coming up and, within the episodes, Sean, there's an awful lot of, you'll see images of quite destructive landscaping, and I think it's kind of interesting. I don't know if you think about, I often talk about the ancient world, Sean, but one of the ancient wonders of the world is called the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. And a source of great wonder to those in the ancient world. And if you understand a bit about that's a desert culture, that this thing existed. and how it worked with Archimedean screws, etc. So about 500 years before Archimedes, maybe 4 3. But it's fascinating, these and how we get water out of the air, this kind of thing. Sean said Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix itself is sited in an ancient agricultural center. The city has a massive canal system that is built on the remnants of the indigenous system. Interesting. Abandoned around 800 AD after an extraordinary drought, the system was built so well it didn't seriously deteriorate for over 1100 years. And it's interesting, Sean, that again, in terms of what we understand about cultures from a long time ago, as evidence is often lacking, we're starting to find a lot more. But all things decay, etc. But yet the sophistication, particularly within desert cultures of irrigation and stuff like this, it's interesting if you look at particular myths. For example, I'll give you a good one: the labors of Heracles, as I like to call them, the 12 labors of Heracles, or the 13 labors of Heracles, if we prefer. But a couple of them are, for example, defeating the Hydra. And if you cut one head off, two appear. Yeah. And if you understand hydro, water, it's actually a metaphorical story about irrigation. And a number of the stories, water. Interestingly enough, when we're talking about water themes and so on. And there's another one where he has to clear out a stable. And this is actually the one of the labors that doesn't count because it's considered he cheats. And so I think to cover this one, he has to go retrieve an apple from the Garden of the Hesperides. But what he does is, again, Heracles diverts a river. And instead of shoveling out this amazing amount of crap, he just lets the water pile through and clean it, if you see what I mean. So, desert cultures in particular, they're a lot. Our ancient cultures are a lot more sophisticated than we like to think. A lot more sophisticated. I have often wondered, says Sean, if Frank stopped here when he was traveling to Mexico, there's a colonial headquarters that features a botanical garden with plants that don't fit the environment. The book to check that out, I suppose, would be the Dreamer of Dune. I think that discusses that trip. Sean, so have a wee look at that. It's been a long time since I've read it, but that's the biography of Frank by his son Brian. But it's kind of you often wonder about Frank and where things would have gone with this, if you see what I mean. And it has a wee chat about. I think there's even probably some photos. So if you're wondering if he stopped in Phoenix, Arizona, that would probably be where you'd figure it out, or unless you could ask Brian himself. Phoenix. That's an interesting thing. Phoenix is the tutor of Achilles. Phoenix. Yeah, there's some great names in America. Well, I'm just wondering, Sean, maybe you don't know, but why is the city of Phoenix called Phoenix? Which of is it to do with the bird or the? I'm just curious. I know, a lot of American city names are quite interesting, and they're often correspond to other places in world history. There we go. Do a good call. Does Brian respond to emails? Not as far as I know. I don't think so, Sean. He's on Twitter, I suppose. But it's my experience that a lot of people don't kind of respond to these kind of things, But there we go. Well, listen, folks, I'll tell you what. Thank you very much. I'm still keeping my throat. This was a little bit of a short episode tonight, but from now on, we're hitting the ecological stuff heavy. So I hope you can join me tomorrow night for the next episode, Heaven and Hell: The Ecology of a Desert Planet. And let me just check there. Sean saying, I think the bird the city's named after the bird rebirth. Arizona is based on terraforming dams. Must look into that. That sounds interesting, Sean. Thanks. Sorry, I came in at the end. Oh, apologies, Sean. I haven't been well since I started doing these, and I've done about 23 of them in a row every night. So we'll be back tomorrow night again. But I'm just kind of keeping my throat a wee bit. Where the wee short ones are, it's all good fun and stuff like that. But I'm kind of just sort of saving myself for the big episodes, if you see what I mean. Otherwise, I'll be quite happy to keep chatting. But I have to tell you, I'm so bunged up. I really am. I feel like my nose is about to blow off my face. Just got boom. So I'm sorry, guys. But as I said, tomorrow night's episode starts the big look at the ecology within the Dune series. Hopefully, we've set up enough information for you within the last few episodes. And yeah, I'm sure we'll have a bit more crack tomorrow night, and I'll definitely be staying on a wee bit longer, Sean, if that's of any help. So I'll just read the last few comments and say good night. But thank you for that, by the way. I've always Phoenix is quite interesting. Grimdark says Brian, I think, responds to Goodreads questions. There we go. And he did some Facebook Q&As on his page. There we go. It says, Sean, good to hear it. Get some rest. Good night, everybody. See you next time. Thanks for doing this talk. I was learning a lot. You're more than welcome, Sean. Keep on keeping on. I will do, guys. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Take care of yourselves no matter where you are. And hopefully we'll see you for some more Dune stuff tomorrow night, guys. All the very best wherever you are now. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.